The more you focus on things to be grateful for, the more grateful you feel. The more grateful you feel on a regular basis, the deeper the gratitude tends to feel. The deeper it feels, the more openness you are to the awe-inspiring joy of life. The more you do that, the more things you see that you can be grateful for. Can you see the spiral? So on the 5-day challenge, I gave the concept of what I call the human life balance sheet, right, which is a powerful concept. Every balance sheet has 2 columns, assets and liabilities. We know that. Quick refresher for some of you. If you take a physical asset balance sheet, which is what vast majority of the world focuses on, let's say you have a house and the house is worth, $1 million. And that sits on the asset side of your balance sheet. On the opposite side, on the right-hand side of the page, if that was on the left-hand side, if you imagine a line drawn down the middle with assets and liabilities, on the right-hand side, you put what are your liabilities, and it may be a mortgage that is, $400,000. Now, if you've got an asset for $1 million and a mortgage at $400,000, what is your balance sheet, ladies and gentlemen? Somebody type it in the chat. And yes, I know I do actually know the answer. I'm not that bad at math, but I want to get you thinking. Who's first to the keyboard here? Karen, absolutely. So your balance sheet 600 grand. Now, here's a question for you. Interesting question. How much is that house worth? That $1 million home, how much is that house worth if there were no human beings on the planet? Ooh, 0. So there's no actual value in the house. Where is the value? The value lies in the mindset of the human that then projects that value onto what they perceive to be an external asset. Everybody follow? Okay. And what tends to happen is most people in life focus on the physical world asset balance sheet. What we want to be focusing on is the internal world asset balance sheet, what I call the human life balance sheet, because the only value exists in the human life. Because without human life, there'd be no value in anything else on a balance sheet. So the human life balance sheet goes exactly the same. On one side, you have assets. On the other side, you have liabilities. Now, what could be an example of an asset on there? What could be an example of an asset on the human life balance sheet? Let's see what you got. Play with me, guys. Let's make this interactive. Joy, integrity. Yeah. Love, family, empowering mindset. Vitality. Yeah. Love, relationships, health. Yeah. So when you do a human life balance sheet, which I would encourage you to do, you would see on the asset side, it's how you see yourself. It's your self-worth. It's your character. It's your level of consciousness. It's your habits, your ability to be consistent with developing your relationship to the field, your discipline, your ability to be in line with higher conscious values. That was what sits on the positive side of the balance sheet. Everybody follow? What would be an example of what's on the negative side of the balance sheet? Your liabilities. What's a liability on the human life balance sheet? Anger, says Gina. Yep. Despair, fear. Come on, what else we got? Yeah, goop, correct. Negativity, trying to control, lack, shame, limiting beliefs, negativity. Absolutely, you guys got it. See, on the liabilities, you list what are your limiting beliefs? What are your fears? What are the lies you tell yourself? That what are the things you daren't reveal? What are the stuff that you hide in secret? What is your fear of change? What is your self-worth and net worth correlation? What is your, all of that stuff sits on the liabilities. Can you see how we have a human life balance sheet now with assets and liabilities? Now, if you have higher liabilities and lower assets, can we predict what kind of emotional state that person is in? Now, here's where it's interesting. Most people with a low human life balance sheet, a higher liabilities and low assets, think that the answer to their problems lies in trying to fix the physical world balance sheet. And if I just make enough money, I'll be happy. And if I just get my house, or if I just find the person, or whatever it may be. And if you have a low human life balance sheet and you are off trying to create a high physical life balance sheet from that place, you will never vibrate at the level required to be able to do it. If you focus first on your personal life balance sheet, your human life balance sheet, which is essentially what EMF is doing, and you increase the assets there and you reduce the liabilities, you'll be able to go out in the market and start attracting abundance and opportunities, because now there's more of you coming to the table. So you are going to sit at a different level on the vibrational totem pole, which is going to correspond to opportunities, wealth, and abundance, and happiness and joy coming back. Everybody follow so far? So my point being, if you want to take this a little more advanced than I did on the challenge, is this. A good question would be, how do I reduce the liabilities and how do I increase the assets? Would that be a powerful question? And here's how most people, unfortunately, address that. They turn around and they say, if I want to get rid of my liabilities, then I will work on my limiting beliefs. I will work on my fears. I will work on all of this. How's it working for you, people that have been in personal growth for a decade or more? And that's because there's another concept I explained. The universe doesn't care about what's on your balance sheet. The universe is always self-reflecting back. That's why you don't get what you ask for, you get who you are. Because if you turn around and you realize that all you are is a state of awareness at your ultimate core, and you can wrap that awareness up into a word called consciousness, and you can implant that consciousness into a physical body and call it a human being. But ultimately, what makes you you is your awareness of you. We've been over this. So if, to answer Einstein's question, or to correct Einstein's statement, he said, the most powerful question you could ask is, do you live in a friendly or a hostile universe? And he knew that what he was alluding to was, you don't live in a hostile universe, you don't live in a friendly universe, you live in a self-reflecting universe. So whichever answer you give reflects back to you, and you can choose to live in a victim mode or a controlling mode to try to fix everything so it doesn't bite you in a hostile universe, or you can choose to live in a friendly universe, and that will become your reality based upon your awareness. Is this making sense so far? Now, if the universe gives you back what you are focusing on, if the universe is expanding based upon your awareness and returns what your awareness is pointed to, and you point that awareness at your liabilities on your human life balance sheet, what is likely to expand? Now you start to see why people struggle trying to work on getting rid of their liabilities. Let me put it this way. If you had, let's go to a physical balance sheet. If you had a $10,000 debt on your liability balance sheet right now, for what you're worth, and on the cash side, you had a $10,000 debt, and you had on the assets $200 in savings, how would most people feel? Wah, wah, wah. Right? Not very good. You'd be walking around in deficit, would you not? You'd be essentially trading insolvent, and you would be virtually bankrupt from a financial perspective. Now, let me ask you the question again. You have a $10,000 debt liability on your balance sheet. You have $2 million on your asset sheet. How do you feel? But it's the same $10,000 debt. But because your asset side is now so much larger, how does that deficit start to feel? Inconsequential would be the term that I would use. Yeah. Now let's translate that to the human life balance sheet, and you'll see how rules and values start to play out. If you were to have a current human life balance sheet that included some of your fears and limiting beliefs and self-doubt, You could try to focus on that to get rid of it, but that's not going to be half as important, half as effective as focusing on just growing your asset side. Because if you had a huge amount of self-love, a huge amount of non-judgment, huge amount of gratitude, how would, by contrast now, those liabilities look? More inconsequential, would you agree? So when it comes to installing new values, don't worry too much about the old stuff. Don't worry too much about the triggers that have been triggering you on how do I deal with the fact that that person still makes me angry. Focus on the asset side of the balance sheet. And the negative side of your balance sheet will start to diminish naturally. And the reason it'll diminish naturally is because every one of your liabilities that you will put on your human life balance sheet is fabricated. Oh. You weren't born with a low self-esteem. You didn't jump into this universe not believing in yourself. You didn't arrive on day one of your movie script thinking, oh, I'm scared of what other people think of me. You didn't have those. You only knew your own magnificence. And what happened? Yeah, because babies only have two natural fears: fear of loud noises and fear of falling. They don't have a natural fear of not putting their finger in an electric socket, which is why parents say, oi, don't touch that. They're naturally curious. Yeah, they don't have a fear of the fact that their neighbor next door, who's also 2 months old, has parents that are a different religion. Babies aren't born with that stuff. So everything that is now currently sitting on your personal life balance sheet liabilities list is a fabrication. You put it there based upon a false belief, on a reference that you acquired, that you told a story about that allowed you to keep that reference. Oh, I was betrayed. No, you weren't. You were under the illusion that you had the right over what somebody else should or shouldn't do in your relationship, and therefore chose to take a victim mentality on it, and therefore chose to shut down your heart, and therefore chose to put on your liabilities list, unloving, unlovable. See how it works? And rather than try to get rid of that, focus on the asset list. Find things you can be grateful for. Because the more you focus on that, if your awareness is there, what is going to expand? The more you focus on things to be grateful for, the more grateful you feel. The more grateful you feel on a regular basis, the deeper the gratitude tends to feel. The deeper it feels, the more openness you are to the awe-inspiring joy of life. The more you do that, the more things you see that you can be grateful for. Can you see the spiral? So stop trying to work on getting rid of being unloving. Focus on what goes on the assets, because if you can grow that to a mountain, the molehill on the other side that looks big when you're on flat ground suddenly diminishes. So does that help when it comes to understanding how to apply values and rules in the context of the module? Oh, what about my old away from rule? Stop focusing on the wrong side. When you train yourself to be grateful, it's pretty hard to be triggered to be angry. When you train yourself to be on purpose with life, it's pretty hard to procrastinate. And then if something crops up, it's essentially your emotional guidance system that is telling you that, is this in alignment with your values? Or is it a shortcut to cover up fear? Or is it something that you're a little scared of, but you've got to do it because on the other side of that, there's a breakthrough? Powerful questions.